Seal, and I'm going to be reading the beginning of my second story, which I've titled Dust. The house, on a rise in the shade of a honey locust tree, had been empty for as long as any neighbor's short memory could recall. Once it had been white and quite splendid, commissioned and furnished by a wealthy family who thought to own a small ranch in utopian isolation. It was only after it was finished that they realized they'd made a poor choice in location. Southern France, or even Hawaii, were far more desirable sites than an unnamed town of oven-baked red dust. So they put it up for sale without visiting once, and turned their attention to more promising countries. The broken for sale sign stayed up even after the house was off the market and in possession of the government, years after it had been decided that no one was interested in an expensive residence in the middle of nowhere. The building had not fared well under the heavy bearing of time. The white paint had cracked and peeled under the merciless heat of daylight, and the dust itself had crept over the outer walls and boarded windows, taking most of what could be seen from the little cluster of one-story buildings that passed for a town in these parts. The house had made the people nervous, the way it watched them from its place on top of the hill. Its shadow stretched blue over the tops when the sun slipped beneath its steep roof, bringing the night just a bit sooner than it had come before. The honey locust made them worry too. It was not native to the small, nameless town in the deep west, and its yellow-green leaves looked like whatever artist had painted the desert scene had accidentally picked a color from the wrong palette. The people, save for a few rebellious teenagers throughout the years, had taken its thorns as a literal warning to stay far away from the skeleton manor. But eventually that wore off, as all superstition does in time. The tree was bar-damn beautiful, and as the years went on, its presence remaining concrete and unchanging, the people began to get used to it. It was lovely to look upon, they reasoned, after a few years had passed for them to thaw towards the alien blossoms in the spring. There wasn't much else about the place that was beautiful, save for the occasional dusky sunset. One major change in their isolation was enough for them to handle. The second took them far, far longer to accept into their reality, especially since it was a change that was not so still as the house and the tree, but instead moved among them and affected their lives. Other than the occasional visiting family or overzealous tourists, outsiders rarely entered the town. The people had been saved from newcomers when the rich family had abandoned the house, but eventually someone claimed the property for their own, as someone was bound to. He arrived accompanied by an ominous cloud of dust on the horizon. Even that was unfortunately enough to earn him a rough welcome from the suspicious souls squatting in that part of the country. When the sun had risen that spring morning to fall upon the billowing clouds of dust, the townsfolk weren't interested much in what it was. They only wanted it to pass them by. But of course, they weren't that lucky.